Bert Breer from the MMQB. Thank you so much for joining us on the fly. Hello.
Hey, what's up, guys?
All right, so what have you been hearing? Is this a surprise that it came out right now?
No, I mean, I think they didn't want to make this a Black Monday thing. And the reality of it is this decision has been made for a while. And just talking to more people this week, one thing that I definitely was able to ascertain is like everything changed in Germany. And it went from, let's see if we can save this, let's see if we can salvage it, maybe with some tweaking, we can kind of reset after the year to this thing is over. And, I know, coaches and scouts in the building, they felt how important that game in Germany was to Robert Kraft. And I think there was a sense of embarrassment in the way that it went. Now, if they had reeled off 7 wins in a row or whatever, maybe that gets you to move off your spot a little. But I think the main thing, guys, is even though they played a little better at the end of the year, it didn't change the systemic issue. And the systemic issue was never whether or not Bill Belichick could coach. It was how he was filling the staff and how he was filling the roster. And I think the idea of fixing those two things would have necessitated a whole lot of change. And, I think for Bill, it's easier to enact that change somewhere else than it is here. And for Kraft, there was just too much history here to do it with a guy who's 72 years old.
All right, what do you think they've been doing the last few days?
I mean, the same things that normally happen were happening. So Monday, the coaches have their exit meetings. My understanding is Bill and Kraft did meet at one point on Monday, but most of the stuff on Monday is to kind of go through the roster and have your exit meetings with your players and do all the stuff to tie up the season. On Tuesday, Belichick basically dismissed his coaches and said, all right, you guys are off for 2 weeks. You guys are due back on the 22nd. None of that's unusual. That's what you'd normally do if you don't make the playoffs. Some of the scouts actually went to the Hula Bowl, I think 2 days ago in Orlando. And, really yesterday was, I think, the first day where it was just Kraft and Bill. And I think that's why you get the decision on Thursday morning. You decide how are we going to do this the right way. And in the end, I think really kind of like this really was going to always come down to whether or not Bill and Kraft would play ball with each other. And, Kraft wanted, I think, again, like this elegant conclusion to the Belichick era. And was Bill going to play ball with him? And I think one of the big things was Kraft going to demand compensation for him? And I think the fact that Kraft didn't demand compensation probably made finding this sort of exit a whole lot easier.
Okay, so they're in the report by Schefter and Reese. They specifically named the Atlanta Falcons as a destination for Bill Belichick. Is there a reason for that?
Well, did I say it to you guys on Friday? Because this thing was floating around.
Yes, you did say it on Friday, yeah.
Okay, so this has been floating around for a little while, and I'm not so sure there hasn't been some back channeling that's already happened here. I don't think – look, if you want to look at this from the perspective of Arthur Blank, he's 81 years old, and if you look at, the 5 hires that he's made as the owner of that team, they're all sort of dice rolls, right? So Jim Moore, a young assistant, Bobby Petrino from the college ranks, Mike Smith, who was an older assistant but never seen as a head coach, then Dan Quinn and Arthur Smith, who were both young rising assistants. He's never taken a big swing like this. And, I know at the end of last week the feeling was Arthur Blank is fishing around to see if there is a big swing out there for him because he really likes Arthur Smith. But if that big swing is out there for him, he's willing to take it with a roster that's close outside of the quarterback position. Not that that's a small deal or that's easy to fix, but if you play a quarterback in there, they can be pretty close. And, cool. What are we going to ask, Fred?
Okay, I was going to ask you, but John was telling me nonsense I don't need to hear. There's a press conference at noon today if you needed to know that right now during an interview. But I will tell you this. is that they mentioned Gerard Mayo in this as well, which is interesting because Vrabel's available. Lifshatz is telling us that he heard Vrabel was out with Kraft the other night. Is there a reason Mayo, specifically why, like, obviously when this report came out, Mayo's mentioned in it? Besides the obvious.
Yeah, because, well, no, I mean, look, I think Mayo, I think that's been the plan. Now, I think the plan was Mayo in 2025, not in 2024. But, like, last year, I mean, I can tell you this, like, the Panthers really did want to talk to Mayo, and Gerard really thought about it. And even if he wasn't planning on taking that job, Gerard was well aware that it could help him if he went down there and at least interviewed. Because if you do well in one of those interviews, owners talk to each other, and that can help you, you know? So his decision to not go there was a result of a negotiation with Kraft. He got paid well. Now, he didn't get the defensive coordinator title, but my understanding is he didn't really want it. And it was set up so his contract would dovetail with Belichick's. In other words, his contract ends at the same point that Belichick's ends, which gives him flexibility in case it's not something he wanted to do. But, you know, they cannot write into the contract a succession plan because of the Rooney Rule. It's just logistically impossible to do it. But they did a lot of things to both position Gerard to become the next head coach and protect him if anything else were to happen. And so everything's been set up for Gerard to succeed Belichick. Now, again, the plan was for it to happen a year from now, and they hadn't gone 4-13 yet. But a lot of that's the plan. The other thing, guys, is Vrabel's going to have options. And I would keep an eye on the Raiders with Vrabel.
So, but would you put Mayo in as coach, given that you're following a legend like Vrabel? Makes sense in that Vrabel, you know, has been a star since he was a kid. He's head coaching experience. He can handle it.
Right.
You know, would you put a first year head coach in this position if a guy like Vrabel was available?
Well, I mean, do you think the Texans rolled the dice a little on D'Amico Ryans last year?
Yeah, sure.
Do you think the Rams with Sean McVay? I mean, I don't know. It sort of depends on how you look at this, right?
But they weren't. But the Rams.
But they weren't replacing a legend.
Right. They're different. I mean, the Texans' job isn't the Patriots' job. I mean,
you're following two very different head coaches.
Yeah, I think Ben Johnson probably is a great. I would, if I was an owner, I'd roll the dice on Ben Johnson. But I'm not sure if I would do that if I was the Patriots. I think Vrabel is a better. Let's put it this way: I think Vrabel's a better candidate for the Patriots job than he is for the Seattle job, right? I think that. Go ahead.
Can you get him though?
Because do you think they'd pay? Do you think they'd pay?
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so for Mike, Mike's a really good head coach, right? No question about it. In a lot of ways, he has the same strengths that Bill does. He understands the rules and uses them to weaponize his players. He schools his players on situational football. He can coach all three phases of the game. But if you're Mike, one way you have to look at this I'm going to get a second shot, but I might not get a third.
Sure.
So where do I want to take it? And I mean, look, do you want to come to a place? And all due respect to the radio station, how are you guys going to talk about this next coach if he's 3-4 in 2025? And this might be a 2 or 3 year build, right? How are you going to talk about that coach?
Well, I like that we're a factor. Poorly.
Yeah.
But I think it is. But I think it is. I think the climate of the market is. We've done this before, Fred. Dan Campbell went 9-8 last year in Detroit and didn't make the playoffs. They were throwing a parade for him. What happens if the next coach here goes 9-8 and doesn't make the playoffs in 2025?
2025, I think that. See, here's the deal: is that Vrabel can come in.
Running him out of town.
No.
You guys will be running him out of town.
If he goes 9-8 in 2025 and they didn't go crazy in free agency and they have a young quarterback,
considering where we are now,
yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, Felger and Maz might.
So I'm just saying, but I think
fair.
that is a fact. I'm just regardless, though. I think that's a factor. You know what I mean? Where the level of expectation is, how much patience they're going to have with you. I mean, look, Robert Kraft hit 2 home runs, right, with the last 2 hires. if you just look at the resumes of those guys, there's 2 Hall of Fame coaches, Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick. Who is better positioned to succeed and why?
All right. One more thing, Bert. Do you think any of this was moved up on the Patriots timeline with this announcement based on what happened yesterday? Pete Carroll, no one saw that coming unless you did. Nick Saban retires, and things are moving, and I think there's a sense that, wow, this should be happening here in New England since we all know it's happening anyway. Did they get forced, their hand get forced a little bit?
If anything, maybe it was delayed, because, I could certainly see, basically, if they had planned to, let it out last night, maybe it was whoa, Carroll and, Saban. I could definitely see, Bill wanting to respect Saban,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
If they were all right, we've met, we're done, and then, but Bill knows, and Bill would know, right? Bill knows that Nick's retirement's coming.
Sure.
Bill might be hey, listen, let's just wait till tomorrow. I don't want to upstage my buddy. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's interesting.
Lifshitz made that point off the air, in fairness. Livy Schatz was already on that thing. You're following in his footsteps.
I didn't even hear you say that, Dan. That's a good point. All right, good.
You pieces of garbage. All right. Well,
I think I do think one thing to keep an eye on with the Raiders, honestly, guys, I just wouldn't underrate Tom Brady's presence there.
Oh, really?
He was at their practice. He was at their practice on Friday, and everyone there sort of took note of it. I talked to a couple of people who were there. He was talking with their general manager. I think there's a decent chance that Brady has a real voice in the Raiders search. And Tom Brady is much closer with Mike Vrabel than anybody in the Patriots organization is. And again, if you're Vrabel, would you not look at this and say, well, if I go to Vegas, they're going to build around me, and I'm going to be able to pick my general manager, and I'm going to be given some patience. And I've got, Max Crosby and Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams, and this team was in the playoffs 2 years ago. And, you just sort of start to add things up. And, it's a way of saying Vrabel's going to have options. And I think he likes ownership here, and I think he likes a lot of things about this place. But there are negatives too, and he is going to have, I think, multiple landing spots that'll be out there for him.
All right. Well, very good. Bert Breer, we really appreciate you coming on with no notice. We thank you.
Thanks,
thank you
Bert.
so much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, there you go. Bert Breer from MMQB.